the ancient land of Canaan, surrounded by arid deserts, walled cities, and nomadic tribes, lived one of the greatest patriarchs in the Bible, Abraham, a man whose heart was completely turned to God. The story of him and his family is marked by promises, miracles, challenges, and, above all, by an unshakable faith that became an example for generations. Abraham's journey began long before the birth of Isaac. He had already obeyed God by leaving his homeland, Ur of the Chaldees, and had traveled to many places, always in search of the promised land, a land that God had promised to his descendants. However, Abraham and Sarah, his wife, faced a great challenge. Despite all the promises, they had no children. Sarah was barren, and the years of waiting became increasingly difficult. Even as he grew older, Abraham continued to believe in God's promises, but the hope of having an heir seemed distant. After much anguish and failed attempts, including when Sarah, in despair, offered her servant Hagar to Abraham so that they could have a son, which resulted in the birth of Ishmael, God finally renewed his promise. In a surprising visit, 3 men, who represented the Lord, appeared to Abraham and reaffirmed that Sarah would give birth to a son. Sarah, who was hiding in the tent, laughed at the prophecy, since she was already 90 years old and Abraham was 100. However, God asked, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is there anything too hard for the Lord?" It was then that the promise came true. And so, at the time determined by God, Sarah conceived and gave birth to Isaac. This birth brought joy and amazement, a true miracle that made Sarah laugh and caused everyone around her to marvel. Abraham, obeying the divine command, circumcised Isaac on the 8th day, marking the covenant between God and his descendants. Isaac grew up healthy and strong, and with each passing day, Abraham and Sarah's faith grew stronger, for they saw before them the literal fulfillment of God's words. Abraham's joy in Isaac was immense. He saw in this boy not just a son, but the embodiment of the divine promise he had long awaited. However, family conflicts began to arise when Sarah realized that Ishmael, Abraham's son with Hagar, could threaten Isaac's inheritance. During a feast celebrating Isaac's weaning, Sarah observed Ishmael playing with her son and felt overwhelming jealousy. Fearing that Ishmael might claim the birthright, Sarah demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Abraham, torn between his love for his children and his desire to please his wife, was deeply distressed. God, however, comforted Abraham and told him to follow Sarah's words, assuring her that although Isaac was the heir of the promise, he would also make Ishmael a great nation because he was Abraham's descendant. The next day, Abraham prepared a small bundle of food and a skin of water, placed them on Hagar's shoulders, and sent her and Ishmael away. The two set off aimlessly, braving the scorching heat of the desert of Beersheba. The journey through the desert was relentless. The water soon ran out, and Hagar, in despair, could not go on any longer. She placed Ishmael under a bush, walked away, and sat down a short distance away, unable to watch her son die. As Ishmael wept, God heard the boy's cry and sent an angel to comfort Hagar. The angel said, "Do not be afraid, Hagar, for God has heard the boy's cry where he is. Arise, pick up the boy and hold his hand, for I will make him a great nation." At that moment, God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well of water. She ran to it, filled the water skin, and gave Ishmael a drink, saving him from certain death. Protected by God, Ishmael grew up in the desert, far from his father's home, and became an excellent archer. His mother, Hagar, found him an Egyptian wife, thus perpetuating his lineage. Meanwhile, Abraham continued his journey of faith, living in peace, but still facing challenges. One such moment occurred when Abimelech, the king of Gerar, came to Abraham to make a peace treaty. Abimelech recognized that God was with Abraham in everything he did, and so he wanted to ensure that Abraham and his descendants would live in peace in their land. Abraham accepted the pact, but not before complaining about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had taken by force. Abimelech, surprised, declared that he had not known about it. To seal the deal, Abraham offered sheep and oxen, and even set aside 7 sheep as a gift for Abimelech, confirming that the well belonged to him. The place became known as Beersheba, the well of the oath, because they made a solemn agreement there. However, Abraham's greatest test was yet to come, a test that would shake the heart of any father. Some time later, God decided to test Abraham in a way no one could have imagined. God called Abraham and said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a sacrifice on one of the mountains that I will tell you about." Abraham remained silent, but his faith and obedience were greater than any fear. The next morning, he got up early, saddled his donkey, chopped wood for the burnt offering, and set out with Isaac and 2 servants toward the land of Moriah. For 3 days, Abraham walked in silence, carrying an unimaginable burden on his chest. When he saw the place in the distance, Abraham told his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go up to worship. Then we will return." Abraham placed the wood on Isaac's shoulders, took the fire and the knife, and together they walked up the mountain. On the way, Isaac innocently asked, "Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" With a heavy heart, Abraham replied, "God will provide the lamb for himself, my son." Arriving at the appointed place, Abraham built an altar, arranged the wood, and with trembling hands, tied Isaac and placed him on the altar. As he raised the knife to sacrifice his own son, an angel of the Lord called out, "Abraham, Abraham." And he answered, "Here I am." The angel said, "Do not touch the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. He took the animal and sacrificed it in Isaac's place, thanking God for his providence. In honor of that moment, Abraham named the place, "The Lord will provide," a declaration of faith that would be remembered for generations. God reaffirmed his promises to Abraham, assuring him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and that through them all the nations of the earth would be blessed. This moment not only strengthened Abraham's faith, but also demonstrated that God always keeps his promises, even in the darkest times. Abraham descended from the mountain with Isaac, returning to where his servants were waiting. Together, they returned to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live for many years. Abraham's life is a testament to faith, obedience, and God's faithfulness. His story reminds us that even in the most difficult situations, trust in God guides and sustains us. This story, rich in challenges and miracles, inspires us to believe that God's promises are always fulfilled, even when the path to them is long and full of trials. Abraham lived not only as a patriarch of a nation, but as a timeless example of unshakable faith, whose story continues to touch hearts and teach about the power of trusting in God.